Hello. Today we will be learning to convert between fractions, decimals, and percents. Please add that topic to your table of contents. So this is how your table of contents should look right now. We should be around page 15 to 16. We're still in Unit 1, the real number system. Our topic today is converting numbers between fractions, decimals, and percents. And then our essential question is, how do we convert between fractions, decimals, and percents? Make sure you have a little bit of space on the left-hand side to write questions if you don't understand how I get the answer to something. Go ahead and pause the video right now to make sure that's all filled in before we begin our notes. All right, the first one we are going to look at today is to convert between decimals and percents. Okay, so the first one here is we have decimals going to percent. So we want to convert these three examples to a percent. Well, our rule when we are converting is to move the decimal 2 places. If I am converting between a decimal to a percent, I'm going to move my decimal 2 places to the right. So move to the right. Okay, so now my decimal is behind the 80, and then we have to add a percent sign. Okay, if I have nothing behind that decimal point, we don't need to write it. So 0 and 80 hundredths would be 80%. All right, same thing here. I'm going to move that decimal place 2 places to the right. So now the decimal point is between the 6 and the 7. And then I'm going to add a percent sign. So this would be 16.7%. No matter how many numbers are here, we're still going to move that decimal place 2 places to the right. So here we have to add a 0. So now the decimal place is behind that 0, we add it. Again, if there's nothing behind the decimal, we don't need to write that decimal point. So 0 and 5/10 would be 50%. Okay, let's go the other direction. Let's convert percents back to decimals. So in this case, I'm going to move the decimal to the left. So in this case, there's no decimal, so that means it's behind the 7. So I've got to move it 2 places to the left. So now the decimal point is in front of the 9. So this would be 0 and 97 hundredths. Oh, I don't want that percent sign. 0 and 97 hundredths. Okay, so now, same thing, I don't have a decimal, so it's behind this 7. So I'm going to move it 2 places. So now the decimal point is between the 3 and the 4. So 347% becomes 3 and 47 hundredths. Okay, so in this one, the decimal is way out in front. We're still moving it 2 places to the left. So 1, 2. So even though this is already a decimal, we're still going to do that. And then we have to add some zeros there for those spaces. So now I've got 4 zeros and then the 8. Yeah. All right, let's see what happens if we want to convert between fractions and decimals. So converting between these. So the first ones we're going to look at is the fraction to decimal. So here, all we do is we divide the numerator by the denominator. Okay, so I just do 13 divided by 20. So we divide the numerator by the denominator. And that's going to give us 0 and 65 hundredths. Now you can just type that in your calculator, that's okay. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing with 1/2. I'm going to divide 1 divided by 2, and that's going to give us 0 and 5/10. Okay, and again, you can type that in your calculator. All right, now what happens if we are converting decimals back to fractions? This can sometimes be the most challenging, so we have to turn it back into a fraction. So I need to look to see where the number to the right ends. What's that place value? So this 8 is in the hundredths place. If you forget, it's tenths, hundreds, thousands, and so forth. Okay, so this is in the hundreds place. So since this is the hundreds, that means we put 28 over 100. And then we reduce. Okay, so we have to figure out what's my least common factor or my greatest common factor in all of these. So what is the largest number that can go into both 28 and 100? Well, I recognize that it's 4. So I'm going to divide both the numerator and denominator by 4 because I need to reduce this. So 28 divided by 4 is 7. 100 divided by 4 is 25. Okay, and because our numerator is now a prime number, it's fully reduced. Okay, let's look at the next one. We have 7. This is in the tens place. So now I'm going to create 7 over 10. Now, I can't actually reduce that. 7 is a prime number. So this is already reduced for us. Okay, I'm going to move 0 and 36 hundredths down here. Okay, so we're looking, this is in the hundredths place, so it's 36 over 100. And now I need to reduce. Now let's say you can't figure out what the greatest common factor is between these two numbers. And that's okay. What you can do is see, all right, they're both even numbers, so I know 2 is going to go into both of these. So I would divide them both by 2. So 36 divided by 2 is 18, and 100 divided by 2 is 50. Well, I notice they're both even again, so I'm going to divide by 2 again. And you can keep doing this until the problem is fully reduced. Okay, so 18 divided by 2 is 9, 50 divided by 2 is 25. Okay, there is no common factor between 9 and 25. They're both perfect squares, so it's 3 and 3 for 9 and 5 and 5 for 25. So that would stay that way. All right, let's convert between percents and fractions. So let's start with percents first. Okay, if I want to convert between percents and fractions, it's kind of similar to what we just did with the decimals. Okay, but a percent is out of 100. So we're always going to put the percent over 100. And then we reduce. Okay, so we look to see what the greatest common factor is between 70 and 100. And hopefully you recognize that it's 10. So we divide both the numerator and denominator by 10. And we end up with 7 over 10. Okay, same thing. I need to put it out of 100, so I end up with 86 over 100. I have to figure out what my greatest common factor is. I'm really noticing that just 2. So I'm going to divide them both by 2. So 43 divided by 50. Now this one's kind of challenging. You can just go through and check all the factors of 50 to see if they go into 43 to determine if that is a fully reduced fraction. All right, now, if I want to go from a fraction to a percent, I'm going to have to do it almost three times. I'm going to convert the fraction to a decimal and then the decimal to a percent. So that means we need to go from the fraction to the decimal to the percent. All right, so as I'm looking at this one here, I have to divide 12 divided by 15. Okay, and that is going to give me 0.8. And then we already learned that to go from decimals to percent, we have to move that decimal 2 places. So there's 1, 2, so that means I'm adding a 0. So the decimal is now after that 0, and then we add the percent sign. So this is 80%. This is one we tend to get wrong because we'll just write 8%. Okay, make sure you move the decimal 2 places. All right, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do 3 divided by 25, which will give us 0.12. And then I need to move that decimal place. So now the decimal is after the 12, so this becomes 12%. Hopefully this is a little bit of review for you. Okay, what we're going to do now is just practice. So I have 6 problems here that we're going to practice, and I want you to convert each to the other 2. So that means if it's a fraction, you're going to convert it to a decimal and a percent. If it's a decimal, you're going to convert it to a fraction and a percent. If it's a percent, you're going to convert it to the decimal and fraction. Okay, so you're just going to convert it to the other 2. So let's do one together. So 7/8, I need to convert that to a decimal and a percent. So I'm going to divide 7 divided by 8. And we get 0 and 875 thousandths. And now I also want it to be a percent. So I've got to move that decimal 2 places. So it becomes 87.5%. So that's the other 2 right there. So go ahead and pause this video and do the other 5 problems. Hopefully you've taken the time to pause the video, you've worked out the other 5 problems, so let's see how you did. Okay, so as I just said, we just did the first one together. So number 2 should have been 0.6 or 0.60. I like to add this 0 so I don't mess up the percentage, which was 60%. Okay, number 3 should be 32% and 8 over 25, or 8/25. Number 4 should be 36% and 9 over 25/5. 78% should be 0 and 78/100ths and 39 over 50. And number 6 should be 0 and 65/100ths and 13 over 20. Okay, if you got any of those wrong, please make sure you realize what your mistake is. And at this time, you can move on to your assignment for today.